There is talk of another intifada, or uprising, by Palestinians against Israel's military occupation in the West Bank. For the first time in 6 years, Palestinians are calling for armed resistance against Tel Aviv. What has brought all this about? Will it happen? Who is fueling the fire here exactly? And how much is US President Donald Trump complicit in the unrest? Welcome to Palestine Files. I'm your host, Wissam Bahrani. We're going to dissect all these issues and more on this episode.
More than 130 Palestinian protesters have been injured in the latest clashes with Israeli forces across the West Bank.
بعد 26 سنة من هذه المجزرة لا زالت نتائجها على الأرض، وهذا لا غرابة، لأن المجزرة هي جزء من سياسة الاحتلال. لا يمكن أن يكون هنالك احتلال بدون مجازر. ستبقى المجازر وستبقى نتائجها على الأرض إلى أن يزول هذا الاحتلال من خلال إصرار الشعب الفلسطيني على حقوقه.
They sustained the injuries after Israeli troops attacked demonstrations against Tel Aviv's plan to build thousands of new settler units in the occupied West Bank. Israel says it will construct 3,500 settler units, essentially annexing what's left of the occupied territories. The new settler units will cut Jerusalem al-Quds from the West Bank. The regime feels emboldened to grab more Palestinian land after US President Donald Trump unveiled his so-called deal of the century.
Under this vision, Jerusalem will remain Israel's undivided, very important, undivided capital.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced the settlement plans, which have been on hold since 2012 amid international pressure, shortly after the White House presented the so-called deal of the century in late January 2020. Washington's initiative is highly controversial. Among many contentious issues, it ensures Jerusalem al-Quds as Israel's undivided capital and allows the regime to annex Palestinian land in the occupied West Bank. All Palestinian groups who boycotted the so-called peace plan have unanimously rejected it. 50 former foreign ministers and leaders from across Europe say Trump's initiative will leave Palestinians living in circumstances similar to apartheid.
Similar to apartheid, many would argue that Palestinians are already living under apartheid. The topic is hot on social media. Here are just some of the comments. Lucy D says totally unforgivable and the world just watches like in the 30s in Germany. Frank Owen says, care to comment? Labour Friends of Israel. Frank there taking a dig at the British Labour Party, I believe. And moving on to the next one from Sid Walker, who says, just like the rapidly right-wing Board of Deputies, the Labour Friends of Israel rarely comment when ethno-supremacists they support murder indigenous Palestinians. They don't bite the hand that feeds them. Another reference there to the group in Parliament that supports ties between the UK Labour Party and the Israeli Labour Party. Zionist crimes in Palestine says they should be sanctioned and military action against them should they continue to fail to comply with UN resolutions. But I'm guessing it's anti-Semitic to suggest Israel be held accountable for their crimes like other states have been. Howard May, perhaps the Palestinians shouldn't have rejected every opportunity for statehood. The past 70 years, actions have consequences. Everyone's entitled to their point of view. Jeff Davis says, perhaps the Zionists shouldn't have stolen Palestine, lied about it and begun the slow-motion genocide of Palestinians. I'm assuming you're a Jew and support the crime in progress Israel, but worse than a crime, it's a mistake, it's suicide, the next Holocaust, and it's coming for you. Jeff there having a dig at Howard. those were some viewpoints. In case you want to hear what Palestinians make of this, you're going to right now, because our team spent time on the ground in the occupied territories speaking to Palestinians from all walks of life.
عارفين ان هاي صفقة مصاري مش صفقة سياسة، لأن ترامب رجل أعمال بدأ يلم مصاري من السعودية وغيرها، وهذا كل ما في الأمر لا أكثر ولا أقل.
الانتفاضة موجودة، يعني الانتفاضة لو الشعب غير منتفض ولكن داخليا منتفض. الأهم شيء العامل الأساسي هو الداخل الفلسطيني بالشعب الفلسطيني، فغير راضي لا عن ما صار ولا عن ما يجري.
بقول ان شاء الله ما بتصير اول شيء صفقه القرن هاي تبعتهم، صفقه القرون هاي، وان شاء الله اول شيء ما يصيرش انتفاضه ثالثه. شايف كيف؟ بتمنى الخير من ربنا يعني.
هي ممكن لو ضلوا مصممين على رايهم ممكن تشتغل الانتفاضه.
انا ما بتوقع انها على المدى القريب، ممكن تكون على المدى الابعد شوي، وخاصه اذا اختلفت الظروف وظل السيد ترامب هذا مصمم على مواقف.
مقاومة الاحتلال في الضفة الغربية موجودة وواردة بأي لحظة. يعني شهدائنا اللي نزلوا من 5-6 شهداء من خلال ال10 أيام اللي أعلنوا عنها ترامب بصفقة القرن، بنوجه لهم التحية.
ممكن تشتغل انتفاضة ثالثة ورابعة وخامسة طبعا، لأنه هذا شيء بصميم الشعب الفلسطيني وأساسه أصلا.
قد تكون هناك انتفاضة وقد لا تكون. لماذا؟ لأنه الشارع الفلسطيني هو غير موحد، هناك انقسام فلسطيني، كل الفصائل الآن هي مشغولة بمشاكلها الشخصية.
تأكيد ما قاله زعيم الثورة الإيرانية بأن الصفقة ولدت ميتة هو بكل تأكيد ما قالته القيادة الفلسطينية، وأيضا الفصائل الفلسطينية موحدة بإدانتها لهذه الصفقة والتي نسميها الرؤية، لأن الصفقة لا تتم إلا بين طرفين، وهذه الرؤية التي طرحتها الإدارة الأمريكية وحاولت تمريرها وأيضا أن تمررها على المنطقة العربية بأسرها. لم تستهدف الفلسطينيين وحدهم بل استهدفت المنطقة العربية.
It's a very serious issue, so without further ado, let's bring in our first guest of the show. Randy Nord is an activist and political analyst. Ms. Nord, welcome to Palestine Files. The big question here, I believe, is will there be another Palestinian Intifada?
So something in the West Bank has to reach a breaking point soon. It's under military occupation. The Israelis control everything, water, sewage, the flow of people. They have also started a trade war to suffocate the West Bank economy even more than it already is. And the Israelis also haven't stopped building their illegal settlements and preparing to annex more land. We just recently saw the UN release a list of shame, naming international companies that do business with the illegal Israeli settlements. But I think we all know no one will really try to enforce that. It's probably more of an extortion racket than anything else. But the people, they move into these settlements are often violent and racist too, on top of everything else. They kidnap and torture Palestinian children and destroy homes. And the Palestinians really have no one to rely on except themselves because they're strategically isolated from the international community. So I would like to say the West Bank could respond with an uprising because the conditions are definitely ripe. But I'm not sure if it could happen because they also know that Israel will respond with widespread bombing and terror as we've seen so many times in the past.
Right, so I guess my follow-up question to that would be, are Palestinians in the occupied West Bank ready to resist the Israeli and the American conspiracies against them?
I think on one hand, Palestinians are sick of living under occupation and being cut off from the rest of the world. The escalating aggression from the Israelis under Trump's support has certainly galvanized popular support to resist. For a year, we saw massive crowds show up in Gaza every Friday for the Great Return marches to rally against the Israeli and American regimes. and their aggression. On the other hand, the Palestinians, especially in the West Bank, are completely isolated, and their means to resist occupation and Israeli policies are very limited. If a Palestinian child throws a rock in the direction of an Israeli soldier, the Israelis will respond by bombing the child's school and throwing them in prison until they're an adult, and torturing them. So whether militarily, economically, or politically, Palestinians have minimal leverage to resist the Israeli aggression because they're isolated from the international community. And of course, this is strategic. But at the end of the day, the Israelis can't expect to keep taking and occupying and not have the Palestinians respond in some way. So something has to give eventually.
Ms. Nord, thank you very much for your contribution to Palestine Files. Randy Nord is an activist and political analyst. Dear viewers, we're going to take a very short break and be right back with the rest of the show, so don't go anywhere. The latest figures show that the month of January this year saw more than 635 acts of resistance in the occupied West Bank and occupied Jerusalem, al-Quds. This included 47 significant operations. Both locations have indeed witnessed an escalation of resistance. This is in response to Israeli attacks that have wounded hundreds of Palestinians. Retaliatory actions have resulted in the injuries of some 10 Israeli settlers and at least 12 Israeli occupation soldiers. According to the Palestinian Authority, Palestinians are in the process of forming a popular mobilization to counter US-Israeli projects on their land. Students are playing a bigger role in confronting the so-called deal of the century, while residents across the occupied West Bank are organizing protests.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has appeared before the United Nations Security Council. He denounced Trump's so-called deal of the century as a gift to Israel and unacceptable to Palestinians.
هذه خلاصة المشروع الذي قدم لنا، وهذه الدولة التي سيعطونها لنا هي الجبنة السويسرية سويس تشيز. من يقبل بكم أن تكون دولته هكذا؟
The Palestinians did not participate in the talks between Washington and Tel Aviv. They say the White House has forcefully taken over the so-called peace process, provided nothing for the Palestinians, and gave everything that Israel had asked for in numerous failed peace talks.
هذه الصفقة أيها السيدات والسادة تحمل في طياتها الإملاءات وتكريس الاحتلال والضم بالقوة العسكرية وصولا لترسيخ نظام الأبارتايد الذي عفى عنه الزمن منذ وقت طويل. يأتي الآن في فلسطين ليبقوا لنا الأبارتايد.
Abbas has called for a day of rage. He has also pledged to thwart Trump's plan no matter who the victims might be. Hamas says Israeli plans to draw new maps according to the deal of the century is an extension of the American-Israeli aggression. The resistance movement has called on Palestinians to intensify their resistance.
الشتات بنرفض صفقة قرض، وبنأكد على أهمية الوحدة واللحمة، وبنطالب من المجتمع الدولي أنه يتحمل مسؤولياته، وبنطالب أنه ينفذ قرارات الشرعية الدولية.
The Islamic Jihad movement says Palestinian resistance will not hesitate to respond to any aggression targeting the Palestinians. Meanwhile, the regime's military sources, as cited by Israeli media, suggest that January witnessed an escalation of resistance operations in the occupied West Bank and occupied Jerusalem al-Quds.
Let's bring in our second and final guest of the show. The author and human rights activist Ryan Dawson joins us. Ryan, it's great to see you. Now, if I could start by asking, it looks like rival Palestinian factions are uniting, putting their differences aside. Is Israel afraid?
I think the Israelis that are going to have to face it are petrified of that. I think the Israelis in the upper brass don't care. They're not the ones with any risk in the game. Ultimately, even with all the factions united, the Israelis are backed by the United States, and they have a significant gap in superior technology and weaponry. However, they can't take losses. They can't get skin in the game. We saw how quickly they gave up when Hezbollah gave them a bloody nose, and they're scared to go in on the ground. They do very well when they're shooting from above, from a distance, but that's not going to be enough, and I think they are petrified to go into Palestine. As we've seen in their last three previous wars they've had, they lost them all against Lebanon, and they couldn't get into Syria either. And so it will be humiliating when they lose to Palestine as well, but that is their future.
Now, the leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution has said that this so-called deal of the century will die before Trump does. Do you agree?
I mean, that deal's already dead. There's no way to enforce it. It's not a deal. You can't have a deal between two parties when only one party is invited. The Palestinians did not even participate in making this deal. This was a Netanyahu, Kushner, Trump thing. And the Palestinians never agreed to it. So there is no deal. And there's no way to enforce this deal. You can forcibly try and annex territory, but you're going to meet violent resistance for it and condemnation from the international community. Israel's really shooting itself in the foot here. There is no justification whatsoever other than just not allowing discussion through censorship. There is no argument they can create to justify land annexation, snipers shooting children, and just all the brutalities that Israel implements with ethnic cleansing into Palestine. You can't make a deal about trying to get a side to agree to be ethnically cleansed. No one would ever agree with that, and no one would blame anyone for rejecting such a horrible quote-unquote deal.
Right, and Ryan, you know, Israel is planning to annex Palestinian territory. Will it do it alone? You know, can it achieve this in the face of the resistance?
They will not do it alone. They never do it alone. They're always given billions of dollars from the United States, and they also extract quite a large chunk from Germany and Canada. So they're never alone, and their weapons, I mean, they have F-15s. The U.S. is arming them. The U.S. is paying for this. They're almost a proxy force. Can it do it? Unfortunately, yes, they can. Depends on how hard the resistance is, and they may not annex as much as they intended to, or as when they started, but they have already annexed large areas of territory, and probably in the C block they will continue to do so. Unfortunately, it still must be resisted anyway.
Ryan, thank you very much indeed for your contribution. Ryan Dawson there, an author and human rights activist. Now, our team have been on the ground in the besieged Gaza Strip, where they spoke to a leader of a very prominent resistance movement. Let's get his perspective.
الضفة الغربية هي جزء أساسي من فلسطين التاريخية من البحر إلى النهر التي احتلت عام 67 تضاف إلى التي احتلت عام 1948. الأصل في علاقة الشعب الفلسطيني مع الاحتلال هو المقاومة، والضفة الغربية لم تخرج ولن تخرج يوما عن هذا الأصل في التعامل مع الاحتلال، وهو المقاومة بكافة الطرق الشعبية والسلمية والمسلحة ضد الاحتلال. زيادة هذه العمليات في الشهر الأخير هذا أمر جيد ومهم، وله دلالة أن الحالة الثورية رغم كل المعيقات والتحديات التي واجهتها الضفة الغربية وعلى رأسها التنسيق الأمني من السلطة الفلسطينية، إلى أن الشعب الفلسطيني وجماهير الشعب الفلسطيني دائما كانوا يتمسكون بالأصل، وهو المقاومة والجهاد والكفاح ضد الاحتلال. هذه المرة كان في سياق مقاومة صفقة القرن التي يحاول العدو وحلفائه الأمريكان فرضها على الشعب الفلسطيني. ستستمر، لكن الشكل قد يتغير من حين لآخر حسب تغير الظروف الموضوعية في الضفة الغربية وفي كل فلسطين. يجب أن نذكر أن الشعب الفلسطيني انتفض ليس فقط ضد صفقة القرن، ضد الاحتلال الإسرائيلي بشكل عام، وهو موجود قبل صفقة القرن، وهذه المشاريع الأمريكية لم تتوقف يوما ما رغم خطورة صفقة القرن، إلى أنها حلقة الأخيرة من سلسلة حلقات تصفية القضية الفلسطينية التي تمارسها الإدارات الأمريكية المتعاقبة على القضية الفلسطينية، هذه المرة تحت مسمى صفقة القرن لإنهاء الصراع تماما لصالح هذا العدو الصهيوني. الشعب الفلسطيني قال كلمته أنه يرفض هذه الصفقة ويقاومها، وسيستمر في ذلك بأشكال.
Growing calls and, in some cases, fears of another intifada has made headlines around the world. Here are what those reports said. This increase of tensions in what is already a very hostile region in the world doesn't make the world any safer. As we saw and heard on this episode, Trump has instigated the mounting tensions by unveiling his so-called deal of the century. A deal that is very one-sided and rejected by many in the international community. Will the plan even work? The leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, says it will die before the death of Trump himself. That's all the time we have for this episode of Palestine Files from me and the whole team. Thank you for staying tuned and see you next time.